Thank you. I've got the truncated bio of Mr. Wilson. I'm going to try and go through this real quick. I think it's worthwhile for me to read this so you can kind of, for those of you who aren't familiar with Mr. Wilson, kind of get an idea of what he's been up to his 90 years, and I'm sure he'll come up and expand on it. Here we go. Mr. Wilson is a real estate developer for 61 years, chairman of the Welcome Group, landlord to 4,000 square feet of manufacturing and industrial facilities in 87 locations in Texas. First projects in the 1950s and 1960s were master planned communities called Jamaica Beach and Tiki Island in Galveston County, both of which are now separate cities. He later developed apartments, retail centers, hotels, and 3 downtown office buildings. Honors include inducted into the Texas Business Hall of Fame, receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award of the Houston Business Journal, and awarded an honorary doctor's degree from the University of Houston, where he was a BBA grad in 1949. Of note, he received the University of Houston Distinguished Alumnus Award in 1970, the University of Houston Bauer College of Business Distinguished Alumni Award in 1996, the Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2005 from Texas Southernmost College, and the Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley in 2018. In the past, he was chairman of the board of two Houston banks, was chairman of an American stock exchange company, was a board member, and owned 10% of the Houston Astros baseball team. In March 2018, he celebrated his 90th birthday. He is a longtime chairman of the Board of Regents of the University of Houston, chairman of its drive to Tier 1, and is chairman of the Political Action Committee. He is director emeritus of the Greater Houston Partnership, having served a long time as its higher educational chairman. 4 more paragraphs. In the 50s and 60s, he served as the executive office. Let me slow down here. You need to get this. In the 50s and 60s, he served in the executive office of the president under Presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy. He witnessed the atom bomb test in Nevada and the hydrogen bomb test at Bikini Atoll in the Pacific. In 1958, he was awarded the Arthur Fleming Award as one of the 10 outstanding young men in federal service. Out of 600 who received this award in 1948, Wikipedia lists him as a notable 20, along with astronaut Neil Armstrong, Defense Secretary Robert Gates, Senator Elizabeth Dole, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Federal Chairman Paul Buckner, and TV Network's John Chancellor. He was invited and spoke to a joint session at the New Mexico legislature. He was appointed special ambassador to Nicaragua by LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. After World War II, he served for 2 years as a naval officer in Japan, having graduated first in his class at officer school. He married his college sweetheart on the day he graduated from the University of Houston 69 years ago. They have 5 kids, 16 grandkids, 16 great-grandkids, one of which is in college. Mr. Welcome Wilson Sr.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm so pleased to be here, everybody. I spoke to this group about 5 years ago. Stuart Morris Sr. was in the audience then, too. Stuart is one of my elders, one of the very few that's left. He and Gerald Hines are about the only ones left. I'm going to speak about the early days of real estate in Houston, Texas. Then I'm going to conclude by speaking about some of the presidents that I have known. I'm going to speak for 20, 22 minutes, something like that, and take 10 minutes of questions. So please be thinking about questions to ask me. Let me talk about the early days of real estate. I came here after World War II to attend the University of Houston. I graduated from Brownsville Junior College, now called University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and came to University of Houston as a junior in 1946, right after World War II. I'd been drafted in 1945 during World War II, and I had my orders to report for the draft on September 17, 1945. Harry Truman, the president, dropped 2 atom bombs on Japan a month before, in August. The war was canceled in a week. My orders were canceled, and I went to a second year at Brownsville Junior College and then graduate. When I came to the University of Houston, it was 18 years old and I was 18 years old. And today, now 72 years later, it's 90 and I'm 90. You know, if you hear me talking about happy hour, I'm talking about a nap. Andrew, I never thought I'd live to see the day when I would say, "Oh, to be 75 again." I was taught to respect my elders, and Stuart Morris Sr. is one of the few I have left. Now, what was Houston like in 1946? First of all, there was 500,000 people in the metropolitan Houston area. 500,000. Today, there are 6.5 million people in metropolitan Houston. 6.5 million. The leader in real estate was Jesse Jones. Jesse Jones was from Houston and had served under Roosevelt and Truman in the Secretary of Commerce in Washington. Let me give you an example of his influence. I knew it, by the way. In downtown Houston in those days, there were 9 hotels. Jesse Jones owned 7 of them. There were 12 office buildings in downtown Houston. Jesse Jones owned 9 of them. He owned the biggest bank. He owned the biggest radio station. He owned the biggest newspaper, the Chronicle. He was Mr. Houston. I remember Mr. Jones very well. He was tall, dignified, always wore a double-breasted suit, even when it was not in style. And I'll never forget one day I saw him in front of the Lamar Hotel where he lived, getting into his chauffeur-driven car to go to the office, which was about 6 blocks down the street in the banker's mortgage building. And he was not in a limousine because he was so tall, he would bump his head when he got in a limousine. So it was a Ford convertible. And Mr. Jones was chauffeured around town in a Ford convertible because he was so tall. There were other great leaders in those days, such as Gus Wortham, the insurance company man, H.R. Cullen, all man, John Meekham, an all man, R.E. Bob Smith, an all man, George Strait, George R. Brown and Root, and Judge Jim Elkins, Johnny Crooker, Fulbright, Freeman, Crooker, and Jaworski, Leon Jaworski, Colonel Bates, Captain Baker of Baker and Botts. I knew them all. If you want to know how somebody in their 20s gets to know the top leaders of Houston, ask me during the questions. R.A. Bob Smith was the largest landowner in Harris County. He owned about 30,000 acres. He was the largest landowner in Fort Bend County as well. He owned a couple hundred acres just west of River Oaks. It's now called both sides of the West Loop at Westheimer. I'll never forget in the early 50s. I drove with him out to see a piece of land that he had just bought way out west, way out. And he had paid $1,200 an acre for 500 acres. Later, he acquired a total of 7,000 acres that went all the way to Richmond, Texas. And so we get there and we look at this land. And I said, well, you know, it's a shame. Here I am just getting into the real estate business, and all the good deals are gone. And he said, you silly peckerwood. If you want to know what a peckerwood is, ask me the question. You silly peckerwood, don't you realize the boom in Houston has only begun? He said, banks will now lend you money on raw land. They would never do that before, ever. And he said, the boom in Houston has just begun. He was right. By the way, the land we looked at is now called West Chase. It's both sides of the West Belt for 3 miles. Let's get back to me being 90 years old for a minute. It's not all that bad. Everything I buy comes with a lifetime guarantee. The older I get, the better I was. I know history's been treating me kindly because I've written it, and then after everybody else is gone, they know better. My first real estate development was Jamaica Beach in Galveston. Now, how did somebody in the early 30s get the money to start a development? Well, I'll tell you how. In Galveston, nobody trusted anybody to pay a note. So everything had to be for cash. So we bought 300 acres of land down the West Beach. R.A. Bob Smith bought it for cash and sold it to me for $1 down. And then I'd pay him something when I sold something. Then I needed money to put in streets and utilities. So he co-signed my note at National Bank of Commerce for $250,000. They didn't even ask me for a financial statement because he signed the back of the note. It was a little bitty note about this big. Well, I had no idea what a great favor he was doing for me. And that wasn't the last time. But anyway, we started Jamaica Beach. My partners in Jamaica Beach were my brother Jack, Bill Sherrill, later a member of the Federal Reserve Board in Washington for many years, Johnny Goen, later Mayor Pro Tem of Houston for 22 years, and Jack Valenti, later President of the Motion Picture Association of America for 40 years. Valenti was a great guy, he's the godfather to my son Craig. Johnny Goen is the godfather to my son Welcome. But it was a good group of people. I made every mistake known to man in developing Jamaica Beach. For example, I priced the lots on the Gulf of Mexico 90 feet wide, $3,500. Well, I sold out in 10 days. And then I couldn't sell anything else. And it sat there. My lots were too big. Because people on the weekend don't want to spend their time mowing the lawn. So I put in the streets in between each street and cut the lots into half and sold them for $625 each for a quarter of an acre. Finally, the sales took off. Jamaica Beach today is a huge success. There are multi-million-dollar houses there. It's a separate city, and I'm proud of it. I also developed Tiki Island in Galveston, and my partner, Bill Sherrill, my bookie. My partner, Bill Sherrill, noticed driving to Jamaica Beach that there was this piece of land on the right at the causeway that was about 6 inches out of the water. So he thought it was owned by the state of Texas, like everybody did, but he checked and it turned out it was owned by 5 individuals in Galveston, including the Moody family. So he came to me and he said, look, if we put canals there, we'll have enough fill or dirt from the canals to raise the level of the lots to 5 feet. So, and it's only 45 minutes from Houston. So we can sell first homes in addition to second homes. So I thought it was a good idea. I didn't like the name Tiki Island. And so I hired somebody to come up with a better name, and they came up with Buccaneer Bay, which I think was perfect for Galveston. But Cheryl was adamant, said it was his project, so I called it Tiki Island. And now there's a $4 million house on Tiki Island. It is a big success. And I was in there, Berry Hill Tamales, having lunch about a year ago, and a guy I know walked up to me and he said, welcome, you developed Tiki Island, right? And I said, yes. He said, remember at the tip end of Tiki Island, we had 1,200 lots. At the tip end, there are 2 oversized lots. I said, I remember them very well. We sold them for $18,000 each. He said, I just bought one of them for $500,000. I should have kept a couple. My contemporary developers at the time were Walter Bisher, who developed subdivisions, Gerald Hines, who was developing 2-story office buildings on Richmond Avenue, Helen White, developer of apartments. By the way, the word multifamily had not been invented in those days. We called it the apartment business. Harold Ford was an apartment developer. Halkin Swain, Jimmy Line. Jimmy Line was better known as owning the River Oaks Bank and Trust. But he actually made his money in real estate. And his specialty was simple. He'd go next to a established subdivision that was successful, Frank. And then he would he'd buy land next door, and he'd put in lots with no amenities whatsoever and sell them for cheap. And it was very successful. I negotiated his sale of his bank when he developed cancer to BB&T companies. Not BB&T. BBA. If you want to know anything about those developers, they were all good friends of mine. Ask me during the question. In my day, I thought there was not enough dignity being a resort developer. So I decided to go in the apartment business. We didn't call it multifamily. And so we built 6 apartment projects, and every one of them, Andrew, I started construction in a booming market and opened in a slump. I swear. My first project was Kingsbrook Apartment on I-10, except I-10 wasn't there at the time. It was known as the Katy Road. And then I developed Foxhall Apartments. It's still there on the I-10 in Chimney Rock. And by the way, Johnny Goen, who was Mayor Pro Tem, got Chimney Rock punched through to connect up with I-10. By the way, politics is very important in real estate. Believe me, politics is important. If you want more details about that, I can ask you a question. Foxhall Apartments, I sold them 50 years ago. I probably made $650,000 or something, which I needed at the time, I'm sure. But the point is, now 50 years later, it's still there. It's been 100% occupied 50 years. The mortgage would have been paid off twice. The cash would be falling in. I'd be living in Aspen. That's why we never sell anything anymore. Welcome Jr. joined the business in the 70s, and we developed retail centers, downtown office buildings, and with TCP, that's Texas Commercial Properties, we bought $5 million worth of empty office buildings during the 80s, during the bust. And we'd lease them up and then sell them. And our partners were always Wall Street types. And so after 3 years or 5 years, they would want to sell the property so they could get their Christmas bonuses. And so like I say, we don't sell anymore. We also own a construction company. KDW is called, I'm the W. And we, at any one time, will have about $100 million worth of construction underway. It's been very, very successful. We're now building a $25 million facility, which my company will own, near Katy, Texas, for a German company called MAN Diesel. It's in a project that you could hear a lot about. It's 14,000 acres owned by a billionaire from Indonesia called Twinwood. You'll hear a lot about Twinwood in the future. 21 years ago, having made mistakes in every field of real estate, I got into the industrial building business. And now we have built about 300 projects, and we still own 87 of them in Texas, most of them in Houston, metropolitan Houston. And it's about 4 million square feet. And none is for sale. Along the way, Governor Rick Perry appointed me to the Board of Regents at the University of Houston. And I ended up as chairman for a long time. And my proudest moment was hiring Renew Couture as president. She's wonderful. She is wonderful beyond words, and now the University of Houston is known all over the world. I'd like to talk briefly about some of the presidents I've known. I've known 6 presidents very well, and I've met 2 others, including Donald Trump. But I can't say I know Donald Trump. But let me say this about Donald Trump. if the election were held today, he'd be reelected in a landslide. You'd never know that from reading the Houston Chronicle. But I guarantee you, Donald Trump has the support of Americans.
Amen.
I attended his inauguration. And I've been to 5 or 6 inaugurations. And I'm used to everybody looking like me, suit, tie, etc. At Donald Trump's inauguration, a totally different crowd showed up. Blue jeans, boots, jackets, a totally different crowd. He's mobilized people across America that have never participated before. Let's go back to the presidents. Dwight Eisenhower was the first president I knew and worked for. And when I first met him, the mayor of Houston had sent me to Washington to attend a national defense conference, and Eisenhower spoke. He was president. I was startled because he's pink. I don't mean his policies, I mean his face. His face is pink, and the reason is he played a lot of golf and he has the kind of skin that does not tan. So he was always pink, and every time I saw him after that, he was pink. My headquarters was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area when I was the executive office of the president. It was called the Office of Defense Mobilization. There were 3 branches of the White House: the Council of Economic Advisors, the Bureau of the Budget, and the Defense Mobilization. And I also had an office in Washington, D.C. in the Executive Office Building next door to the White House. And from my office desk, I could see at 5 o'clock in the afternoon the President of the United States hitting golf balls. Every afternoon he was out there hitting golf balls. Well, I can't tell you what a warm feeling that made you have to know that the country is in such great shape that the president is out there hitting golf balls. When I was with the executive office of the president, my rank was a GS-17 in civil service. That may mean a lot, but the equivalent rank in the military is a 3-star general. I was 30 years old. Being over my head has always been my policy. I served briefly under John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy came to my hotel room, and that makes me sound very important. In 1960, let me tell you, he had just been nominated for president of by the Democratic Convention. That was in August, and I was in Washington, D.C. in December with a man from New Mexico who was director of civil defense for New Mexico. So we were staying at the Congressional Hotel next to the Capitol. So we decided to invite the New Mexico congressional delegation, 2 congressmen, 2 senators, over for a drink in our suite. At the last minute, we got the idea of inviting John F. Kennedy, and he came. The most charismatic man I ever met in my life. It all had to do with his smile. Andrew, his smile was so genuine, so warm. It was just wonderful. It would just melt you. And just a tone followed him around wherever he was. He stayed in the room about an hour, and we had a nice visit. And then I was with him again when he came to Houston not to announce, but to dedicate the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston. And we had a ceremony in Rice Stadium. You might remember it. And the mayor had put me in charge of the event. So I was there, and I didn't admit this for 50 years, but being in charge of seating on the podium behind the speaker, we had about 40 dignitaries, including me. So I placed myself so that when the 100 cameras were pointed at JFK, I'd be sitting there on his shoulder. And to this day, about once a year, I'll see a clip on television of that speech, and I'm still there. The night before Kennedy was assassinated, he was in Houston, and the mayor put me in charge of the airport arrival and the motorcade downtown. And I've got a zillion stories about that event. So if you want to know more about it, ask me. First time I met Jackie Kennedy, lovely, lovely, lovely lady. And I was also, he was coming to speak to a banquet for Albert Thomas, our congressman. And I was in charge of the seating at the banquet. So I put myself and my wife right in front of Jackie. Of all the presidents I've known, I knew Lyndon Johnson the best. Because he was a Texas senator when I was with the executive office of the president. He was later majority leader of the Senate. He was Vice President of the United States and then President. I want to tell you a story, and I'll conclude with this story. In the spring of 1963, remember that date, spring of 1963, I got a call from Jack Valenti. Jack Valenti had handled the campaign's advertising. He was an advertising agency guy in Texas. And he had married LBJ's longtime secretary, Mary Margaret Wiley. And they were living in River Oaks. So Valenti called me and he said, the vice president's going to be in town and he wants me to invite the guys to come over Sunday for a drink. The guys were my sister's husband, Archie Bennett, and the 5 guys that developed Jamaica Beach, including Valenti. So I lived on River Oaks Boulevard at the time. Valenti lived on San Felipe, right around the corner. So I went over to his house, arrived last, and I walked in and I looked over and at the fireplace, LBJ was sitting in an overstuffed chair, drinking decaf coffee, 1 cup after another. So I got a glass of wine and I went over and sat down in an overstuffed chair next to him. And you know how it is when you're talking to somebody important, you try to think of something of significance to talk about. So I said, Mr. Vice President, Kennedy has sent the Civil Rights Bill to Congress, but it seems to be dead. And let me tell you why it was dead. In the East Coast, in the Midwest, and in California, they threw their congressmen and senators out after 6 or 8 years. Threw them out. In the South, we elected them for life. So all the seniority in the House and the Senate was in the South. All the seniority, chairman of every committee, etc. So that's why it was dead, because the Civil Rights Bill was not popular in the South. So I asked Johnson about it, and he paused, and I could tell he was trying to decide whether or not I was important enough to give a real answer to or not. And I must have passed the test because he said, "Welcome, let me tell you a story." And he put down his coffee and he said, "When we were campaigning for vice president and president of the United States, the vice president's entourage was traveling through New Mexico. And he said, 'Welcome, you know how New Mexico is. You travel for hours and hours and you see nothing but cactus. And then suddenly you come across a lone service station sitting on the side of the road. 2 stories, a couple lives upstairs, the station is downstairs. You stop in there, get a Coke, fill up with gas, go to the bathroom, and then you go on.' He said, so my entourage of about 7 cars pulled in there, and we did all that, and then got ready to leave, and one girl is missing. She worked in the majority leader's office in Washington. We looked everywhere in that service station for her. She wasn't to be found. Finally, after 5 minutes, she walked in the back door, and it turned out that she was a block behind the building, squatting down behind the bush to go to the bathroom because they wouldn't let her in the restaurant. She was black. Then he grabbed me on the knee and he punched his right hand in my face. And he said, "Welcome, that's wrong. That is wrong." And I'll never forget his next words. He said, "And when I'm in a position to do something about it, I'm going to." Spring of 1963. 6 months later, the assassination occurs. The civil rights bill had gone nowhere. 6 months afterward, LBJ, against all odds, got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. Following year, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and later the Fair Housing Act. So when people tell me that LBJ had to be drug into civil rights, I know better. Well, that concludes my remarks. I want to mention 2 quick things. One is the real estate program at the University of Houston. I called a meeting of the real estate leaders in Houston when I was chairman, and in Gerald Hines' office. And every flavor of real estate was represented. There was about 8 or 9 there. And I proposed a real estate program in the College of Business. And they said, look, we need a graduate real estate program. All of our vice presidents have bachelor's degrees. We need a graduate program. And so we changed it, our plans, and now we have a wonderful graduate real estate program at the University of Houston College of Business. Classes are at night. So tell your people if they want to get ahead in real estate in Houston, that's the place to be. The second thing is my book. Another commercial about my book. Always Welcome is the name of the book. It'll be released the 1st of September, less than a month. It can be bought on Amazon. It can be bought at Barnes & Noble. And there are flyers back. There's that picture back there that you see is the cover of the book. That's me on the top of an office building downtown, taken by my photographer daughter, Pam Francis. That's it. We're ready for some softball questions. That's it.
Mr. Wilson, would you be willing to stick around for a few minutes afterward? Happy to visit with you?
Sure.
Okay, we'll take 2 questions, we'll wrap it up, and then Mr. Wilson can visit.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Some of us here have lived part of that history. Most of these guys don't know how to pronounce San Felipe correctly. It's not San Felipe. In Houston, it's San Felipe.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Didn't you develop Spanish Grant and Lafitte's Cove?
I did, and I bought Sea Isle and Treasure Island and Terramar Beach and others. Yes, sir.
I know this is story, but you told me one time about how you came to go to University of Houston with your father. Would you repeat that real quick?
I'll make it quick. My father felt like Houston would be the capital of the world business-wise. So he wanted us to go to the University of Houston, which nobody had ever heard of in Brownsville, Texas. The University of Houston was 18 years old, and so was I. So when I graduated from junior college, my father took my brother and me to Houston to enroll. And I'll never forget what he told me when he dropped us off in front of trailer number 67 on campus, Army Surplus house trailers after World War II. The only housing on campus we had. No bathroom. Bathroom was a block and a half away. No air conditioning, of course. And he said, boys, I paid your first semester's tuition. I paid the first month's rent on this house trailer, $10. And here's $50 each. And whenever you boys need anything else, I want you just to call me up on the phone. Whatever you need, call me up on the phone. And I'll explain how you can get by without us. And we never heard from him financially again.
Mr. Wilson, we'd like to extend another thanks to you. Thank you so much for speaking for us. It's a pleasure to have you. Mr. Wilson has agreed to stick around for a few minutes, answer any questions, so please feel free to come up and introduce yourself. Please check out his book. It's released on September 1st, is that correct? Yes. You can buy it on Amazon early. It will be released on September 1st, and please look at your flyers for the bowling event coming up. Thank you so much for showing up at CREN, and we get the best speakers. Good afternoon.